Well, Idaho Senator Jim Risch, thank you so much for joining us. As we've heard, a lot going on in D.C. with the vaccine and vaccine rollouts. Senators got together for a big intel meeting, and I understand it's good news.
It's all good news. Look, we're in a deep hole here in Idaho, and things are not getting better. And all the precautions that are being talked about need to be considered seriously. We're individually, each one of us is responsible for our health. The president can't stop you from getting COVID. The governor can't stop you from getting COVID. But we all know what's spreading it, and we all need to take that responsibility seriously. Now, every day we look at those numbers, and they're worse, and it's depressing to see them. But there's good news out there, and there's really good news out there. There's 6 different vaccines that are being developed. They came to be developed because Congress appropriated sufficient funds to incentivize the private sector to go out and do this. And so there's 6 different ones that are being developed. 2 of them are in the final stages of their stage 3 tests. Within days, the Pfizer vaccine is going to be submitted to the FDA. The FDA will review it and then immediately submit it to an independent bureau that is made up of people who are non-government people, and they'll make the recommendation. After that, the FDA is going to issue an emergency use authorization. Once that EUA is actually issued, we have a commitment from the General Perna, who's in charge of the logistics, that within 24 hours, he's going to have those vaccines, which are produced and being produced. He's going to have them on a truck and in the air to the states. The vaccines are going to be there. From now till the first of the year, there's about 40 million doses, and it takes 2 doses, so it'll be 20 million people that will be able to be vaccinated before the first of the year, possibly even more than that. And those will be on the way out very soon. And each state is responsible for determining how they distribute it within their own state and who the priority people are to get it. But as we go past the first of the year and into spring, we're going to have a large part of the population that can be vaccinated and will be vaccinated. We are on the very edge of having this behind us, and I think that's something to be very thankful for on this as Thanksgiving approaches.
Governor Little spoke last week that those initial doses that come into Idaho, they're going to go to the healthcare workers, those frontline health workers that are exposed to COVID people every day. I mean, they're very literally risking their lives when they're in these hospital settings, treating our sickest people. Do we, I guess, have an idea of how many could be coming into Idaho to help those frontline workers?
Well, I think if you take that, just the initial 20 million people that are going to benefit from this, you could probably do it by figuring the numbers, because we will get a pro rata share. Every state will get its pro rata share based on its population. Then it's up to the governor and his task force or committee or whatever every state has to triage who's going to get these first and how many are going to go out. So that could be done. I haven't done that, but like I said, we are just weeks away from having a very widespread program to have this out there. This is good news. Look, I'm old enough, having gone through this with polio, and every year polio would come along, and it was a horrible scourge on us. Dr. Salk invented a vaccine. We all stood in line at the gymnasium, the high school gymnasium, and got shots. And it was gone. It was over. It went to the history books. That's exactly what's going to happen here. And it's hard to grasp that when the numbers are as dark as they are right now. But success is right around the corner, and it's the American free enterprise, free market system. It's the private sector that was given incentives to go out and do this. They've done it, and right behind the first 2, behind Pfizer and Moderna, there's 4 others that they're in various stages of testing. So this is going to move very, very quickly in the United States. The rest of the world, there's things going on in other parts of the world, but the United States is going to have this. We're going to have this in the rearview mirror soon.
Speaking with Idaho medical experts, including Dr. David Pate, who's on the state's coronavirus task force, he says realistically, to push through and push out of the pandemic, you need about 65 to 75% of Idahoans to successfully take the vaccine, whether that's a vaccine that's one dose or two. You mentioned the spring, but do you have I guess, more of a specific target of when we could see 65 to 75% of Idahoans getting a vaccine?
I don't. What I can tell you is the more people that get it, the greater the incident of cases will go down, and probably geometrically rather than arithmetically. Having said that, it's important that people do get the vaccine. A month ago, national polling said only 50% of the people thought they'd get it. That's increasing rapidly. It's up to about 56% right now. I think as this rolls out, people see that their neighbors and their friends and others get it, and that it has been effective and has freed them to go and do what they want to do and get back to normal again. I suspect that number of people who want to get it is going to jump up very quickly.
Of course, a big concern throughout the pandemic has been schooling. Of course, a lot of Idaho children are doing virtual school, and it's very tough for the students and the teachers. The hope had been that by fall 2021, that things would be more back to normal, or back to normal to the point where you could resume school and it could look a lot like the traditional school year. Do you think by next fall that's realistic?
Yeah, the way things are headed right now with the 95% effectiveness that they're talking about, and as rapidly as this is going, with the distribution system that they have set up all over America, like I said, I think we're going to be back to normal sooner than next fall. I really do. It's just amazing how this thing has moved forward, and the word needs to get out there that these days are going to be behind us sooner rather than later.
You mentioned, more and more people sound like, according to surveys, they're willing to take the vaccine, but there will still be skeptics. One reason people are skeptical is because this is a process that is moving extremely quickly. Yeah. It's record pace. It's using incredible new technology. How do you, I guess, convince Americans who are skeptical of not a rushed process, but a quick process, that this is a safe vaccine and this is good to go?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and the American people need to understand that the decision to release this vaccine for use amongst the general public is not the decision of the government. It's not President Trump's decision. It's not Congress's decision. The government can stop a company from putting out a vaccine, but they can't make them put out a vaccine. The companies that are doing this, and I've spoken to them, they want to be absolutely certain that this works and that it doesn't have side effects that can cause real difficulties. It could break a company, and they know that. These are valuable companies, worth a lot of money. Some of them cite the Boeing situation with their 737. They don't want to be in that position, and so the decision certainly will be made by the government whether they can do it. But actually, to make the decision to move forward, the CEO and the board of directors and the safety officers of those companies are the ones that are actually going to make the decision, and it will be such that their interests are protected also.
You mentioned this meeting with senators in Washington, where after a year filled with bad news, you finally get some good news. And not to make light of what's going on right now, it's still a very serious situation. People are dying. I guess, is there a sigh of relief almost that we're kind of getting through this and that there is light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't call it a sigh of relief. I think it's a feeling that we are close to the end. I mean, look, there's going to be life after this. We've been through lots of stuff in America. We've been through a revolution, a civil war. All these things go by. This is going to go by. I think the feeling is that we're getting. We're really at the beginning of the end, and I think that's the feeling there. They're not pushing back on the idea. They're not squabbling over the idea. They're embracing the ideas that these professionals, Dr. Slowey and General Perna, have put these things out that they're doing. And these aren't ideas. These aren't thought processes. These are things that they have done. They've got the distribution plan in place. They've got the vaccines ready to ship. And I think people are feeling like, good, let's move forward.
Distrust in the government's nothing new, but I've spoken with Idahoans that are concerned because of, honestly, the political climate right now in this country is extremely tense. There are people worried that there's politics involved with the science of curing this pandemic. How do you assure Idahoans and Americans that politics have been put aside and that, the good faith effort to get a vaccine out is there?
Yeah. Well, I think people are going to have to listen to all this and make up their own minds, but I'm right in the middle of this. I have absolutely no hesitation whatsoever about this. The scientists who developed this, the companies who developed this, have said they have not been influenced by politics in any way, shape, or form. They're professionals wanting to get this behind us, wanting to get a vaccine that is going to work, and the doctors have specifically said no political pressure has been put on them in any direction and for any reason. They are aware, however, that not only politicians but every American wants to get this behind us and move on with our lives. And they've been in this business a long, long time. Look, we are so fortunate to live in a culture that is the most successful, the most affluent, the freest culture that's ever walked on the face of the earth. And look what we've done with it. To be able to produce in less than a year an actual item that can eliminate this problem that we have. And there's other countries working on it. We're going to be first.
In terms of the relationship between the federal government and the states figuring out the rollout plan, I guess, what's that relationship look like?
It's good. The general is, like I said, he's an expert on this. If we ever get into a war, he's the guy that's responsible for seeing that the weapons and bullets are on the battlefield and the food's on the table. They recruited him and said, look, we want you to get these out as quickly as you can possibly get out. It inspires you to listen to him and talk about how proud he is to be able to have done this for America and to use the skills, the logistic skills they have, where we can fight a battle anywhere on the planet, and we've used those skills to actually get this ready to go.
One comment I've heard over and over from Idahoans is, I'm unsure about the future of our country in the immediate future. You mentioned that the rollout date, end of this year, early next year, that coincides with a presidential transition. From your view, you're plugged in DC, what's the transition looking like? Should Americans be worried?
Americans should not be worried. Look, we are Americans, first and foremost. We've been through a revolution. We've been through a civil war. We've been through 2 world wars. We've been through 9/11. We've been through this pandemic. And by the way, this one is the 6th one we've had since 2003. None of them as bad and widespread as this one. But we are Americans. There is nobody better suited to be able to rise to these challenges than we as citizens of the United States of America. We should all be proud Americans.
There's a popular idea that may not have any gravitas to it, that the transition of power could be messy. I know that this is something that's said on the cable news shows as, will it be some kind of crazy back and forth? What can you say to Americans? Because you've seen the process work.
Sure.
What can you say to Americans about how this peaceful process has always worked in DC? Does it feel the same this time?
244 years we've been doing this. Only one instance was there a difficulty in the past, and that was after President Lincoln was assassinated. Mrs. Lincoln stayed in the White House for some time, but people were very gentle with that and understanding of that. Other than that, there's been absolutely no problems. Circle 2 dates. One is December 14th, the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. That's when the Electoral College meets. They will elect the president. They're the only ones that can elect a president under the Constitution. And on January 20th, there will be a swearing-in ceremony on the front steps of the Capitol building. I'll be sitting about this close to it, as will Vicki, and we'll move on from there, and we're Americans. We know how to do this.
In terms of the COVID response and the transition, I've spoken with Idahoans. They say, I really like the way the Trump administration is doing things. I've talked to Idahoans that are critical of how the Trump administration is handling things. Through a transition, and now with Vice President Biden involved in the transition, have you had an opportunity to speak with him about different strategies?
I've had conversations which I keep between myself and whoever I'm talking with on this. But look, I think what people need to understand is there are 2 million federal employees. The number of the transition is de minimis. All of those other 2 million, whether they're one of the 17 intelligence agencies, whether they're serving in the military, whether they're producing vaccines, whether they're distributing vaccines, these things are done regardless of who the president of the United States is and regardless who the top management is. They know their jobs. They're good at their jobs. I deal with people in the State Department all over the world. I was on phone with a bunch of them this morning. They do their jobs regardless of what administration is there. So America's going to be just fine.
As a top leader in the Republican Party, as you know, we're pushing through the end of the year here in D.C. I know there's a lot of questions from Idahoans and from Americans about what we see on a daily basis in press conference and on Twitter from the president. They're very different realities from sometimes what you're hearing and what you're seeing. I guess, what's reality here?
Well, I think, first of all, the national media has become an entertainment business, not a news business. I crave news. I really do. When I watch local news, I'm so happy to see news that I know isn't, that the adjectives that are used aren't meant to try to bend my thought process one way or the other. People need to go about their lives, pick up the best news that they can, make their own judgments on it. Today, there are so many different portals that you can get news through. You've got to make up your own mind as to which one you think is reliable and rely on that for news. I'm really not into watching the so-called news programs on the cable shows that are really entertainment. They're not news. They're really a fusion of editorial comment with wrapped in some small smidgen of news, and it just doesn't do anything for me, and it certainly doesn't help think through the things you need to think through to get to where you need to be.
I think heading into the election, one thing I heard from Idahoans more than who they were voting for is they were just unsure, because they would go home and watch whatever cable network they were talking about, and then they'd see what the president was saying, and it would be worlds apart. And like the election, for example, and the results, I mean, I don't know how to answer questions sometimes when you have the president talking about how the results are not over, and then you have independent investigations and you have the media saying one thing.
Well, yeah, you know, speaking of results, you know, the pollsters were telling us about, for instance, we had 4 Senate races that were really, that they said were going to be very close and that were Republicans and going to turn to the Senate. We won every one of them, and we won them by double digits. And yet the media was telling us that the Republicans were going to lose them, and it just flat didn't happen. So, you know, you shake your head, and that really shakes your confidence in when people are giving you information that you're supposed to be relying on.
It's time to work across party lines. That's what I'm hearing from all politicians on all levels. Heading into next year, heading through the end of this very trying time, what's it look like in D.C. working across party lines?
Well, first of all, you have to, as long as we have the filibuster in the Senate, because it takes 60 votes to pass anything. Well, we've got to govern. I mean, we've got to pass a budget. We got to appropriate funds to run the government and those kinds of things. So the only way you can do it is working across party lines. There's a lot of ink and film that's that is devoted to the arguing that goes back and forth. But this is a democracy. I mean, when it was put together by the Founding Fathers, it was not designed to be pretty. It wasn't even designed to be efficient. But it was designed so that everybody could have their say. And then, as in any democracy, you vote. And once you vote, that's the direction you have to go.
Dealing with the pandemic and the election, when I talk to elected officials on all levels over the last several weeks, the conversation I end up having is, we want people to trust government. We want people to trust our decision making. It's a democratic republic. They picked us to go serve them the best we can, regardless of who they voted for. At this point, what's your message to Idahoans from, I mean, the top view in Washington, D.C. about trusting, I guess, the system, trusting the election, and trusting the politician?
Well, I think, first of all, we're all human beings, and every government is temporary. Every public official is temporary. And I think, by and large, the vast majority of people that are doing this, Republican, Democrat, far right, far left, they all have the same objective, and that is they want to make life better for their fellow Americans, for their friends, their families, and everything else. We are deeply divided sometimes on how you get there, but everybody wants to make life better for America.
Do you trust in the integrity of American elections?
Sure. one of the good things we have going in American elections is how diffuse it is. We should never, ever embrace the idea of a federal election. Elections are held by the states, and that is subcontracted down to the counties and then down to the precincts. For anybody to try to manipulate an election, it's got to be pretty widespread to be able to do that, because every single precinct is handled differently, it's counted differently, and Vicki ran a precinct for a while, and I trust her. So, no, I think I've been around the world. I was the State Department has tapped me as an observer for elections in other parts of the world, and the actual mechanical parts of the election. A lot of times they get it right, sometimes they don't. But here in America, we are very fortunate to have the government that we have. Look, the government is us. It isn't some elites that have been in place forever and ever pulling the strings, which sometimes people try to sell you. The American people hold the power here, and they exercise that power, and they make changes regularly. The pendulum swings back and forth, and it's a healthy system we have.
I drove down Fairview in Boise today, saw a big billboard that said, "Congratulations, Senator Risch, on your
didn't see
re-election."
that.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, I'll have to go look at that.
I'll tell you the address
Yeah.
or we're not rolling.
Yeah, okay.
Big billboard, though. It says, "Congratulations, Senator Risch. Of course, you're just re-elected. To be re-elected, to go back to D.C. to represent Idahoans, especially in these times. I mean, this is probably a much different feeling than past re-elections. What's your goal? What's your mission?"
Well, first of all, Vicki and I have been married 52 years, and this was our 36th election together. So we've done this before, but it has been the honor of our lives, both Vicki and mine, to be able to represent the people of Idaho as a governor, as United States Senator, as Lieutenant Governor, and all years I spent in the state Senate. And the people you work with are by and large good people. They're groups like everything else. There's an apple here or two that you wish wasn't in the barrel, but by and large, they are good people. They're great people. And one of the wishes I've always had is that every single Idahoan could stand in my shoes for a couple of days back in Washington, D.C. You would come back home to Idaho and kiss the ground like I do every week when I come back here from Washington, D.C. What a great place, and how fortunate we are to live here.
Two groups of people that I've heard a lot about lately are election workers and frontline healthcare workers. Unfortunately, a very small minority of conspiracy theorists have made these volunteers and frontline health workers out to be things they're not. What can you say on a general basis about the great work the election volunteers did here in Idaho and across America, as well as the frontline healthcare workers that are working to take care of our communities?
The frontline healthcare workers are in the same category as saints. I mean, these are people who put it all on the line every morning when they get up and go to work, knowing that they're going to be exposed, that what they do is dangerous to them, to their families, and they do it because they love their fellow man. They certainly are in that category. As far as the elections are concerned, these are people that are citizen patriots. They do this. Almost all elections are handled by volunteers. Certainly there's the professionals at the top that choreograph it, the Secretary of States and that sort of thing. But when it comes down to the precincts of actually voting people and handling the ballots and everything, these are patriots. These are modern patriots that want to see a free and fair election in America, and they work hard at it mostly across America.
As we spoke about, there's a lot of bad news out there right now. It's been a very tough year for everyone. But, to wrap up, I want to go back to this vaccine and the rollout. Again, not to make light of what's going on right now. It's a very serious situation. But for Idahoans out there, for Americans out there, there is good news coming.
There's good news coming, and it's going to be much sooner rather than later. In the meantime, we got to remember the difficult position we're in and do everything we can to turn that around. But hang on. We're going to have this behind us, and it's going to be soon.